Volkswagen certainly believes in styling their vehicles to have a strong family resemblance, and that's why this all-new 2022 Volkswagen Taos looks an awful lot like the Tiguan and the Atlas. But this is a vehicle that really slots between worlds. This is somewhere between a subcompact crossover and a compact crossover in the US, although Volkswagen is calling this an inexpensive compact. In terms of exterior dimensions, this is almost exactly the same size as a Mazda CX-30, not too far off the Chevy Trailblazer, which is technically a subcompact in the United States. But at $22,995, the price tag of the Taos is certainly more subcompact than compact. Dimensionally, the Taos is a bit more compact crossover than subcompact crossover. The width of this vehicle is almost exactly the same as the larger Tiguan. Really, the difference is the length of the vehicle. That means that if you're planning on putting 3 people across the rear bench, this is going to be an awful lot more comfortable than a lot of those other small crossovers in America. We have full LED headlights, and we have the latest version of Volkswagen's distinctive front-end design. This certainly has a restrained and elegant design to it, and a very boxy profile that I also like in the Tiguan and the Atlas. At 175.8 inches long, this is almost exactly the same length as the Subaru Crosstrek. It's about 2 inches longer than the Trailblazer or Compass, 5 inches shorter than a Honda CR-V, and a whopping 9.3 inches shorter than the Tiguan. So when you take a look at this versus the Tiguan, it's easy to see why Volkswagen brought a smaller crossover to the US. However, thanks to the boxy proportions, we find about the same kind of cargo room back here that we find in some of the compact competition, and only 9/10 of an inch less combined legroom than you'll see in a RAV4. The rear end also certainly looks like a member of the family. Volkswagen loves these faux exhaust tips integrated into the bumper, so of course we have them in here. The real exhaust tips are tucked right up under there. We have parking sensors out back and LED tail lamp modules. You'll notice that the turn signals are amber. But unlike many inexpensive crossovers, these are full LEDs, so not just the brake lights are LEDs, the turn signals and the backup lights are as well. Under the hood, we find power levels that are a bit more similar to the average subcompact crossover and performance figures that are more similar to that category as well. This is a 1.5-liter turbocharged engine, but it's a 4-cylinder, not a 3-cylinder like you do find in the Ford Escape. This produces 158 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque. It's mated to 2 different transmissions. If you choose front-wheel drive, you get a traditional 8-speed automatic transmission that will give you 31 miles per gallon, and that's essentially the same 8-speed auto that we find in the RAV4. It's also made by Aisin. If you choose all-wheel drive, then you get a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission that we've seen in other Volkswagen products before. Fuel economy with this combination drops down to 28 miles per gallon. The model that I'm testing today has all of Volkswagen's latest driver assistance tech on it, including forward collision warning, autonomous emergency braking, radar adaptive cruise control, blind spot warning, rear cross-traffic detection, auto high beams, and parking sensors. However, just about everything on that list is optional. Remember, there's no free lunch, so Volkswagen gets to the lower sticker price of this vehicle by making some of these features optional. On the other hand, most of these features are optional in the average subcompact crossover as well. Hopping inside, remember that I am driving the top-end SEL trim, so we have a multi-way power driver's seat with 2-way adjustable lumbar support. A nice touch in here is that the seat bottom cushion adjusts for tilt, something that we don't find in too many subcompact crossovers. We have a manual tilt telescopic steering column with a decent range of motion, and like we find in some inexpensive vehicles out there, the passenger seat remains manual even in this top-end trim. Jumping into the back seat, you'll certainly notice that this is roomier than the average subcompact crossover. There are a few options that give us a little bit more combined legroom, and that's front row plus second row, but very few that will give us a cabin this wide. If I move over to the middle seat, I still have a ton of headroom. This model has the optional panoramic moonroof. I still have about 2 inches of headroom right here in the middle, about 1.5 inches if I'm on the outboard side. But the rear bench itself is very wide. So if you're looking for an inexpensive vehicle that could accommodate 3 child seats, admittedly perhaps somewhat narrow child seats, you could definitely do that in this, and you'd be really hard pressed to do that in something like the Hyundai Venue. That's because the rear passenger area of this vehicle is almost identical in terms of its dimensions to the Volkswagen Tiguan and something like the Toyota RAV4. Combined legroom is just within 8 to 9/10 of an inch of those 2 options. Rear passengers will be happy to find air vents in the center console as well as a USB-C charge-only port. But as expected, the majority of the rear door panels are made from hard plastics. Really just the armrest back here is soft. Behind the hatch, we get 28.1 cubic feet of cargo capacity. I was able to fit 4 of my 24-inch roller bags back here. A 5th one just wouldn't fit. It was really, really close, however. And you could do 4 24-inch roller bags and probably 2 of these 22-inch roller bags just because of the squareness of this cargo area. This is about 9 cubic feet less than we find in the Volkswagen Tiguan, but honestly, not far off what we see in the Kia Sportage. Under the load floor, we find a compact spare tire. This is also where Volkswagen hides the subwoofer. Although we don't have a 40-20-40 folding rear seat like we find in some Volkswagens, we have the next best thing, which is a ski pass-through. This isn't as cargo practical as a 40-20-40 folding rear seat, but it's certainly more practical than the average 60-40. One thing you won't find in the Taos at any price is a power hatch. I'm a little bit torn about that because obviously it's going to be more difficult to open and close the lid if your hands are full, but that's one of the ways that Volkswagen gets to the low sticker price, and it is a little bit faster to open and close the hatch yourself. This interior feels just about as premium as the one in the Mazda CX-30, but the styling is definitely different and a little bit more traditional in here. The available large panoramic moonroof goes to just over the second row passengers' heads. We have height-adjustable shoulder belts and height-adjustable headrests for the driver and front passenger. The leather upholstery features an attractive two-tone design, sort of a chestnut and charcoal combination. These seats are perforated because the front seats are heated and ventilated. The two-tone color scheme continues over on the front doors, where we also find some ambient lighting, something that we generally don't find in inexpensive vehicles. Of course, keep in mind that I am driving the top-end trim, which is certainly within the compact crossover price range. This model has a Beats audio system, so you'll find that little Beats logo on that A-pillar speaker. More ambient lighting going on the dashboard. We have a hard-touch upper section of the dash. This sort of, I guess, metal effect, I guess is what you'd call this trim piece right here, and then stitched goods lower on the dash. The glove box is a bin-style compartment. I was definitely able to fit a large tablet computer inside. Depending on the trim level you're looking at, there will be one of two different touchscreen infotainment systems in the dashboard, although the software run by the systems is essentially the same. This one has factory navigation, and the software is pretty snappy and easy to use. If you've been inside any modern VW lately, then this software should be pretty familiar. Again, more ambient lighting there, stitched goods, two large air vents, the controls for the dual-zone automatic climate control system. Automatic climate control is not standard. There's a manual climate control system in the base version. Two USB inputs for that infotainment system. We have a large storage area there for your smartphones. This model has a Qi wireless charging mat. There's also a 12-volt power port above that. Engine start-stop buttons right over here, electric parking brake. There's a button to disable the auto start-stop system. Then we have a pretty traditional console shifter. Behind the shifter, we have a drive mode dial. This controls the engine, the transmission, and the operation of the all-wheel drive system. Then behind that, we have two very large cup holders. These had absolutely no problem with large American-sized takeout drinks. Then we have a padded center armrest that opens to reveal a fairly small storage cubby. One of the most unexpected features in the Volkswagen Taos is the standard full LCD instrument cluster. Volkswagen calls this their digital cockpit. Let's hope this survives the current ongoing chip shortage out there in the world. This is highly configurable. There are three basic different layouts. You can get regular gauges right there with a configurable center section, more of a modern layout, and then a bit of a combination layout where you can get additional information on each side. This doesn't give you the same sort of moving map display that we find in modern Audis with Google satellite imagery, but this is one of the most attractive full LCDs out there, and it's standard even in the under $23,000 model. The steering wheel is one of Volkswagen's latest designs. It's round with some small sport grips up top. On the right side of the wheel, we find the controls for that multifunction LCD instrument cluster, along with the heated steering wheel button. Below that, we have track forward, backward, and on the left side, we have volume up, down, along with the radar adaptive cruise controls. In my initial 0 to 60 acceleration tests out here, this model took 9.7 seconds to run to 60. That's about the same as the 3-cylinder Ford Escape. Remember that the Ford does start with a 1.5-liter turbo. But this engine has a very different feel to that Ford 1.5-liter turbo. This is definitely smoother, and the engine noise, the engine sounds are definitely more pleasing than we find in the Ford because this is a 4-cylinder design. On the other hand, Ford's 1.5-liter turbo does give you a bit more oomph, and it's made it to a traditional 8-speed automatic transmission. This one has a 7-speed DCT because this one is the all-wheel drive model. You'll definitely notice that the first-year launch takes a little bit of time in this vehicle, and of course it's going to feel a bit more like someone driving a manual transmission, because at its heart, it is a manual transmission. If you're considering the Taos and you're looking at the all-wheel drive model, definitely keep the DCT in mind. Some people like it, some people don't. Personally, I love a good DCT. In my 60 to 0 braking test, it took just 115 feet for this vehicle to stop from 60. That's thanks to decently sized brakes, 225 width tires, which are definitely wider than the ones you'll find on a CX-30, and reasonably low curb weight. Now, reasonably low is, of course, a relative term. This is going to be heavier than a variety of subcompact crossovers, but lighter than many of those compact crossovers. Volkswagen has long been known for delivering vehicles with excellent driving dynamics, and the Taos is no different. This feels like a slightly elevated Golf with all-wheel drive, and that's definitely a good thing. You won't get all-wheel drive in the Golf until you get the Golf R, so not only do we have improved traction, but the all-wheel drive system also helps improve the feel out on the road. With this level of power and torque steer is not the most obvious concern, but if you choose all-wheel drive, you won't find any at all. The larger dimensions definitely benefit the ride quality. Out on a rougher road like this, the suspension system is certainly more polished than what we see in the Mazda CX-30, or some of the smaller competition that has less expensive suspension design, something like the Hyundai Venue. But this also does very well when compared against the average compact crossovers. This does feel a little bit firmer. It seems like we have a little bit more of the smaller road imperfections coming into the cabin versus, say, a RAV4 or CR-V, but the level of polish is definitely excellent. That's something that Volkswagen has long been known for, and that's definitely apparent in this vehicle. In my quick cabin noise testing, I measured 72 decibels in here at 50 miles an hour, putting this pretty comparable to the average compact crossover. But in terms of fuel economy, I've been averaging 30 miles per gallon, which is actually better than the EPA says I should be getting. That's thanks to the 7-speed dual-clutch transmission. One of the reasons that Volkswagen uses DCTs in vehicles like this is that they're quite simply more efficient than the average automatic transmission. You trade the torque converter and the improved efficiency for a slight decrease in terms of shift quality, especially shift quality in stop-and-go traffic. If you're the kind of person that does a lot of in-city driving, a lot of stop-and-go driving, you might want to look at a traditional automatic transmission, because this is going to have a little bit of that manual transmission feel as you're getting off the line, but Volkswagen does a good job of hiding that. But definitely keep in mind, it is still there. Bottom line with the Taos, this is an awful lot of fun out on the road. If this had a little bit more power, this would be an incredible amount of fun. Let's hope that Volkswagen figures out a way to stuff a 2-liter turbo under the hood and a bit more oomph for perhaps maybe an R version or a G version. I'm not exactly sure what a GLI or GTI version of the Taos would be called, maybe a Gauss or something like that, but I am eager to see if they are willing to take that chance. Hopefully you will all pardon my notes here, but I haven't had the Taos very long, and I'm trying to get this video out to you before the embargo lifts. This is going to start at $22,995. That's going to be for the base S model. If you want all-wheel drive, that's going to be $25,040. Remember, the all-wheel drive model is the one that gets the 7-speed dual-clutch transmission that I was driving today. So if you're not a fan of the way dual-clutch transmissions feel, you can get one without it, but you cannot get all-wheel drive without it. I think Volkswagen has hit the nail on the head when it comes to standard feature content as well as optional feature content, because remember, there are a decent number of features optional on the Taos. For that base under $23,000 price, you get the 17-inch aluminum alloy wheels, LED headlights, DRLs and taillights, the roof rails, black side mirrors. You get the smaller 6.5-inch LCD infotainment system inside, but you still get 2 USB-C ports. We get the Volkswagen Digital Cockpit, which really is a unique standard feature. Other important differences to know about in that base model are that we have just one 12-volt outlet in the front-wheel drive model, cloth seats, a single-zone manual climate control system, not the dual-zone automatic climate control. But if you get the all-wheel drive version, then we do get standard heated front seats, heated side mirrors, and heated windshield washers, which is kind of a nice touch. But you'll notice that the active safety stuff is optional. So if you want the front assist, blind spot monitor, rear cross traffic alert, and adaptive cruise control, that's part of a $995 option package. On the other hand, $995 is a pretty good price for all that tech. That's definitely something that I would put on mine. The mid-level SE trim starts at $27,245. That gets you leatherette and cloth seats. You get the 8-inch infotainment system that we find in this model. If you want the fully loaded version, that's going to set you back $31,490 for front-wheel drive, and this one $33,045. The only option available on the SEL trim is a $1,200 panoramic moonroof. That is on this model, and that gets you up to over $34,000. Oddly enough, ventilated seats are only available in the top-end trim with all-wheel drive. Unfortunately, I was not able to spend too much time in the Taos before I had to stop and film this video so I could get it out to you all on time. But I have to say that Volkswagen has really made an impressive small crossover. Not every company out there is good at making a value-driven vehicle like this. The Taos is less expensive than the Tiguan, yes, but I also think it's a better value. Volkswagen has done a really good job picking and choosing which features to put in the base model and which features to reserve for the upper level trims. And then they've also done a really good job pricing this. You're also probably going to get a slightly better deal on this on the Volkswagen lot than some of those Japanese competitors on their lots, because Volkswagen tends to have just a little bit more incentive spend. If you're looking for a small crossover that doesn't necessarily feel small, or if you're looking for something that's a little bit more rugged and awfully like your Volkswagen Golf, you should definitely put this on your shopping list. We have a cargo area that is just about as practical as some of those smaller compact crossovers out there, a rear passenger area, which is honestly pretty good. I mean, it's very, very similar to the RAV4 and Volkswagen Tiguan, surprisingly so, in fact, for a vehicle that is in this size and price category. And that's again because they simply made a shorter Tiguan. They didn't change the width of the vehicle, and that leads to a very accommodating rear passenger area. In my mind, the only downside for the Taos is the engine lineup. I do wish the 1.5-liter turbo had a little bit more pep to it. This is pretty much in line with the 1.5-liter turbo in the Escape, but you will find more standard power in the average compact crossover. However, if you're comparing this to the average subcompact crossover, then we have more oomph out of this 1.5 turbo. It's also worth noting that dual-clutch transmissions are a bit of a personal preference. I don't mind the way this 7-speed dual-clutch shifts. I actually rather enjoy it, but if you're not a big fan of dual-clutch transmissions, you cannot get this with all-wheel drive without getting the DCT, so definitely keep that in mind. Bottom line, the Taos is right for you if you're looking for something that's roomy on the inside, attractive on the outside, and easy on your wallet. If, however, you're looking for something with a hybrid drivetrain or more power under the hood or the ultimate in driving dynamics, this may not be the best fit for you. But again, keep in mind that the Taos is very affordably priced. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comment section below, and of course stay tuned because we will have additional videos on the Taos coming up very, very soon. I'll see all of you next week.